Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Explorer podcast. I'm your host, Mike Duffy, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Nick Stageberg. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's a privilege and an honor to be with you and your audience today.
Well, I'm excited to have you aboard, Nick. So Nick is, part of the men's group I'm in, Gobundance, and I've seen him speak off the cuff. I've also I think I saw you speak once in prepared remarks. It doesn't matter. Nick is a dynamic speaker, has a lot of wisdom. So I'm really looking forward to getting his message out there about what does sustained happiness look like and what has that path been like for him. By way of introduction, he's 41. He's from Rochester, Minnesota. What he does for a living: owns and operates apartment buildings. He also owns a private equity firm with a third of a billion in assets under management. He's been married going on 14 years. He has 5 kids, 9 and under. And he's most excited about kind of being on a spiritual kick these days. The coach asked him if he had an eighth day, what he would he do with it? And it was all about self-care and self-development, connection to the divine. Spirituality is such a broad space and lots to go after there. So he's feeling that. So that's the introduction. And then we talked beforehand just about Nick's recipe, if you will. And I'm going to take through a few of those things. The first thing that caught my attention, you talked about making the worst day of your life the best day of your life.
Mm.
How does that work?
Yeah. So I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, so I'll give credit to him for that. But I had the privilege after I graduated from college to get in the ground floor of a software development startup. Before I did real estate, I did technology. I have a bachelor's degree in computer science and a bachelor's degree in ministry, and I did 9 years at a tech startup. We went from 13 million in venture capital to 100 million in private equity sale over the course of 9 years. And right before the company was sold, they terminated me and seized my stock options. And it
Wow.
was the worst day of my life. Your shelf life is quite short in the tech industry, and as a developer in his early 30s, I'm kind of old. And I always thought that PTSD was like a made up thing, and you just need to get over it, and you can be tougher than that. And I got to experience what that was like. I had, I relived that last day I got fired, over and over again every time I slept, and for about 6 months. I mean, I was really just kind of devastated by that experience. Uh, and I carried this big chip on my shoulder with me for years. For about 3 years, I carried this big chip on my shoulder with me. And then I went to a Tony Robbins event. I'd never heard of him. Thought he might be some kind of snake oil salesman or something. But it just happened that I built another startup over the course of 3 years. Built another $100 million startup, and then kind of the day after my last day at that job, there was this event that I got a free ticket to, and you go to one of these events, and Tony gets you all pumped up, and then he says, "I want you to think about the worst day of your life. Think about the worst thing that's ever happened to you." And just immediately pops into my mind, the day that I was fired from that first startup, and everything was taken from me. And he said, "Well, most people, they often mistake the best day of their life for the worst day of their life. You're never going to mistake the best day of your life for like a average day, a forgettable day. But the story of the comeback, the story of the turnaround, that's the story that it makes your hair stand on end. It gets your blood pumping. What if the worst day of your life was actually the best day of your life? Not saying it is. Just try that on for a second. What would that story be? How would that feel? Do you like those feelings better? Do you like that story better? Well, let me let you in on a little secret. Like, you're the only one who gets to tell that story. No one else gets to tell your story. Only you. Only you get to decide what that means. And if you like that story better, just tell that story. And in a moment, I just felt this big weight lifted off my shoulders. And I get the privilege to like do coaching with these different coaches who do executive coaching and all that stuff. And one of my coaches, he said, "Oh yeah, I work with a bunch of Fortune 500 execs, and I do this exercise where you imagine you go to the top of Mount Everest, you get to shout something for all the world to hear." And almost all my clients, they say, "Fuck you."
Hmm.
Like you've climbed to the top of the capitalist mountain, but you've done it with this huge chip on your shoulder. Like, who is it that you're trying to prove? There's you and God. There's really no one else that you have anything to prove anything to. And ever since then, I don't know, I've just chosen to live in joy and gratitude, And with the utmost sincerity, like this is not some jujitsu Jedi mind trick thing. I am so sincerely grateful that I was fired from that first startup, because once I decided that that was the best day of my life, I thought to myself, well, what would have happened if I didn't get fired? When you do these private equity roll-ups, like, you don't just get a big check. You get just enough that you can go buy a house and a car, and then the rest comes in equity, and then you have to do the next one and the next one, and 20 years later, your whole life is gone, and it's been to accumulate some pile of equity that mostly just makes rich people richer, and they give you just enough money to keep you strung along for all your best working years. I mean, that is the reality of the situation in the tech private equity
Yep.
universe. But when you're on the treadmill, you don't see that. All you
Yes.
see is, and I had to be, I'm a very spiritual man. I think God had to, like, pick me up and take me off the treadmill and just put me on the sidelines for a little while, for 6 months or 3 years, for me to see, like, this is not, there is more to life than this. And so I'm just so utter. I wish I could find the people who fired me. And I mean, at one point, I think I was like plotting their murder. I wish I could, like, shake their hand and say thank you. Like, thank you for, like, I clutched this identity so tightly
Hmm.
that it slipped through my grasp, right? And if I introduced myself in common company, oh, I'm a tech guy, or, I'm a startup guy, or whatever, like, how tragic is that? That your job is your identity. And today, I don't know, I'm a joy guy. I'm certainly a family man, a husband, and a father. And I don't know, like, life is about much, much, much more than that. And then the craziest thing of all this is, like, when you let go of those things that you feel are a wound, a trauma. I feel like trauma is almost an overused word. Thinking about it from, like, just a practical perspective, if you have this story that at some point in the past you've been wronged, or you failed, or you broke down, that's gonna, like, train you that, like, you have a shortcoming, that you can't do something greater, that you have this ceiling to your performance. And when you unlock that, like, anything becomes possible. And so I have the privilege to serve a lot of people today with with our private equity fund, with investments. I have the privilege to lead about 50 full-time employees, and all that is just so effortless compared to how it was when I was on the treadmill, or when I was carrying that chip on my shoulder. Like, that's a heavy chip to carry. That sure makes it harder to carry anything else. So anyone who's listening, like, I would encourage you, like, just, I'm not saying it's true. Just my hallucination. Just try it on for size. Just think of the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your life. I don't know what your mom or your dad or whatever did to you. We've all had terrible things done to us by God, or by people that we loved or trusted, people that we struggle to forgive. But just for a second, what if, just what if that was the best thing that ever happened to you, no matter how crazy that might sound? And just try that on. Just, what would that story be? How would it make you feel? How would it change the way you walk, the way you carry yourself, the story you tell to other people to introduce yourself? How would it change what you think is possible for the future? And at the end of the day, tragically, or in a beautiful way, you're the only one who can decide that story. You get to tell the story, and no one else. And it just might set you free, empower you to do crazy, amazing, beautiful things. I find that encountering a trauma and then, like, overcoming it in a kind of cathartic way, or a transformative way, is almost like the recipe for success. Almost all the most successful people I know have overcome some extraordinarily difficult things. And maybe that terrible thing that's happened to you, maybe it's the story of the comeback. Maybe it's the story of the turnaround. Maybe it's the story of the underdog who prevails. Maybe it's the story of the superhero before they discover their power. And if none of those stories are appealing to you, well, who cares? It's your story to tell, not mine. So whatever story you want to tell yourself that just makes you feel joy, like, find that story. And I think you're going to lead a very beautiful, fulfilling, rich life.
It strikes me as a heavy lift for many people to be able
Mm-hmm.
to go from ruminating about the past and it keeps coming up and you keep kicking yourself in the shin, to make that mental shift of what are the positives here?
The key to life, it isn't money, it's happiness. And when you measure how happy you are, you actually become even more happy. Our friends at Gobundance, the tribe of millionaires, use a very specific tool to measure their happiness. It's called the Life Happiness Index. And you can have it too. Go over to Gobundance.com/LHI and take your Life Happiness Index assessment. You'll rate yourself in multiple categories on exactly how happy you are and get a custom output for you specifically that you can use in developing whatever goals you have for your life. Gobundance is the tribe of healthy, wealthy, generous people who choose to live epic lives. And the tool Gobundance members use at the base of all of that is the Life Happiness Index. Get out there and grab life big.
How did that work for you? How would you advise people that struggle with that to adopt that perspective?
So in order to experience good emotions, you need to be in a good physiological state. So I'm standing up, and if you're listening to this podcast, you can't see it, but I'm in this office where literally I have newspaper articles that are printed and framed of all of my greatest achievements. So literally, no matter where I look, I just look at all of the amazing things that I've done with my life, charities that we support. We built a school last year. We bought the former city hall, and we get to steward that asset for the next 100 years. Like, I am perpetually reminded of the good that I have done. So if you're sitting in like a dark, cramped space in the basement office, and then you're trying to think, and I have wall-to-wall windows in front of me. I'm in Minnesota, and there's a blizzard going on. We're going to get like 7 inches of snow right now, and I'm in Minnesota, and I love the snow. I can't wait to go out skiing, and so I get to look at you, Mike, and all my amazing achievements, and I'm like inside of this snow globe, and so that environment puts me into a state, into a place where it's easy for me to think those good thoughts, and then it's effortful. It's really effortful. Like, you might need to write down what those stories are and try them on for size. It's not like you just one day wake up and you're strong. Like, you need to go to the gym, and you might have some breakthroughs where you have I got this technique, now I can increase my deadlift. I'm in the gym 5 days a week with a trainer. Today was deadlift day, so that was we tried a thing differently today. I've been lifting weights for years, and we tried a little different technique today, and it was a significant improvement. You have breakthroughs, but I think it can, just as you said, Mike, it can feel like a heavy lift, like a overwhelming, intimidating thing to just turn your whole life on a dime. If an epiphany feels heavy, maybe try them. This is a word that I made up. It's not a real word. It's not in the dictionary as far as I know. Try an epiphanet. What's just a little insight that you can glean? What's just one thing about you that's better, that's stronger for the challenge that you faced in the past or in the present? Like a perfect example of that. So today, I've got a brand new baby. We've got a 15-week-old baby. And if anyone out there has babies, that at least for me, sleep is the toughest thing about having small children. And it's tough to wake up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and excited about the day and believing in yourself when you did not sleep the night before. So my wife, the baby had a bad night last night, and my wife was up, from midnight till 4 or something like that. I don't know. Slept for an hour. Then at 5:30, I think she woke me up and was like, "Get the baby out of here." And she needs to get at least a couple hours sleep before she needs to work. And so I go out to the living room and holding the baby, just feeling. I'm not in a great state, right? I'm groggy.
Yep.
Turn on the coffee maker early because it's too early for the scheduled coffee maker to start, so I have to wait for the coffee, and I'm just not feeling good. You know the feeling of tipping back in your chair, and you go just past the point where you feel like you're about to fall over. You know
Yep.
that feeling, Mike?
Yep.
So somehow I've dialed in that feeling where I can feel myself slipping into a really ugly state where I might be full of anger or wrath or just whatever. And so the deck is stacked against me at 5:30 this morning, not enough sleep, and I can feel that feeling, and I'm like, whoa. This is not who I am. This is not the state that I choose to live in. This is not the story I tell so I stop myself. I pause my breathing for a second. I look around. Okay, so here I am. I'm in my home. We have this beautiful wooded lot with these floor to ceiling windows. And guess what? I got to wake up before the sun this morning. and I get to watch the sunrise through the trees while I hold my son. I don't really get to spend as much time as I would like one-on-one with my son because I got all these other kids, my wife. So I got to just like talk to my 15-week-old son and watch the sunrise, and the coffee maker ran, and I got my cup of coffee. I started feeling a little better. And it's not like my life turned around this morning, right? I turned around my morning, and I mean, that's what it looks like. That's what it feels like. It's just catching yourself, you know?
Mm,
Nelson Mandela said that spite, wrath, envy, it's like drinking poison and hoping your enemy will die.
right.
And all day, every day, I feel like I encounter people that they're they've got a big gulp of poison. They let themselves uh they let those negative emotions course through their veins, which, a man of faith and a man of science, like there's some hormones there. Like if you don't have any dopamine flowing, like you're not going to be in a good mood. And so like it doesn't do you any good to let yourself, when I'm dealing with like an employee who is like having a really tough time, I will literally ask them like, do you want to feel this way right now? Are these feelings serving you? I mean, like the Terminator said that anger is more useful than despair. So anger can serve you if it's like accomplishing a purpose. And I guess I'd rather be angry than in despair. But I will always ask myself, like, are these the feelings I want to feel right now? And if not, well, I should probably like just take a step back and think about, what are the things I have to be grateful for right now? What are the feelings I want to feel? And what things that are just in my immediate surroundings that would help me feel those feelings? What sights, what sounds, what smells? Could I pull up a picture of my baby or my wife, or a proud moment? I have like a library of photos on my phone that I just like look at if I want to feel good. And we all have these photos in our life. So I don't know, hopefully, so I had several answers to your question there, to chunk down. If you don't want to just have a life-changing moment while you're listening to this podcast, well, you could have a mood-changing moment, or you could have a afternoon-changing moment. And what is life other than just a sequence of days that you choose if they're good days or bad days?
Yep. I totally agree. It reminds me of something that Abraham Lincoln said: people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be.
Mm,
Um, but I think there's something really important in what you were saying. You said you felt yourself slipping. There was a trigger for
hmm.
you that
Yes.
then you were then able to get into gratitude. You're able to get into looking at pictures on your phone. How do I want to feel? You were choosing your adventure. But that is such a critical space. Either the emotions are leading us somewhere, and somewhere we're in the back seat and we're following them, or we get in the front seat.
Yes.
And really having awareness of what's your tell. Like in poker, people have a tell. It's the same thing spiritually. What's your tell that you're starting to go off the rails, and
Yes.
really becoming curious about that. And that's a really important awareness to develop as a trigger to do some of these other things and get in the front seat.
Yes.
And, most people feel the trigger in their jaw gets clenched, or they feel tightness in their chest, or they feel a rock in their gut, or just the blood's rising. Yeah, really becoming a student of that, and using that as a pattern interrupt is a huge hack.
Yes. I could just as easily replay the bad pattern. Like I get angry. I I don't like shout or hit or anything like that, but I can perseverate on, feelings or memories that get me more and more angry, and that it eventually like turns into shutdown. It's so that's my like emotional cascade. And when I get that feeling of like, what, this is, so if you lift weights, like I was doing like a deadlift today, and like there's a good, 10-15 second, like the way you grip the bar and the way you kind of preload your legs and your back and then your shoulders, and like you're like rehearsing a sequence of emotional events that you go through when you do like a heavy deadlift. And you can there's like your body is very good at playing through that physiological, emotional, physical script. And if I wanted to, I could just as easily be incredibly angry right now. If that's, I don't know. And unfortunately, that's kind of what we do when we look at like social media and the news. I promise you, if I actually, I'm just kind of curious. If I go pull up CNN right now, just go to CNN.com. Oh, look, this head of state is saying this stupid thing to this head of state, and there's going to be world war. And like, I can already feel like if I wasn't laughing at it, I probably would be getting angry, right? So we're always being, conditioned, primed, anchored to do some behavior. In the case of the news, it's to keep reading the story, right? Because they're trying to get ad eyeballs. So you just have to feel conscious of when you're getting into that script, into that sequence, and just stay out of it as best. And no one's perfect, right? Like I have terrible days all the time. But well, I have days where there's a lot of pain. I have days where there's bad news. Like I joke, like my director of construction, at least 100 times per year, he kind of pokes his head in his office. He's like, Nick, you got a second? And I can kind of play out this script. He's like, okay, well, there's a roof on this property. We got to do this thing. It's gonna be $15,000. And like, oh my God, 15, like, and that happens like 100 times a year. And I could let myself be upset about it. And instead I stay in rationality and in humor. And I wouldn't own a third of $1 billion in real estate if I let it get to me, right? Like, oh, well, there goes another, we've had days where we've got literally, a lawsuit, a death, and a fire all in the same day, and like you have bad days. Everyone has bad days. It's just the only thing you can really do is control how you choose to respond to it, the feelings that you let it evoke.
Yes. And that's a really core Stoic principle that we can control our actions, we control our reactions, but just underlying the point that that's higher order thinking. We first have to get out of the emotion because it's going to lead us on a path. And being
Yes,
able to recognize it, put us in a seat of awareness, then now we get some cards we can play in reframing it.
100%. There's a really valuable tool I always look at 100 times a day, which is there's a Venn diagram in your life of the things that matter and the things you can control. And the intersection between those two things, it's like 1% of where most people put their focus. So like,
Yeah.
hey, I've got a $15,000 unexpected expense at one of my properties. It happens 100 times a year, and it is maybe in my control. It certainly matters. And so literally I'll just ask my construction director, is there anything that I can do about this or anything that we could have done differently? Or are you merely just saying, hey, I need your approval for this expense? He's like, just need your approval. I'm like, okay, I appreciate you working on this. I'm sure you'll optimize this expense to the best of your ability. And like that 15 seconds is really the maximum I can let my consciousness be devoted to that. Or I could perseverate on that all day, and I could have a lot of suffering in that day. Or I could pull up CNN and like, that matters, but it's outside of my control. Or I guess I could go work out at the gym all day, and that is something in my control. But like your minimum effective dose is probably like an hour a day, and beyond that, it probably doesn't matter that much. But most people, they get hit by a whammy by something that matters, but they can't control. Maybe it's the front page of CNN, and then they dive headfirst into something they can control, like a video game or alcohol or something, but it doesn't
Right.
matter, or it's a very counterproductive thing indeed, but it at least gives them some sense of control. And having the
Yep.
discipline to just stay laser focused on those few things that can control and matter like that. And then you have a good day, right? Because at the end of the day, you're like, hey, I accomplished something today.
Absolutely. Speaking of accomplishment, one of the other things you talked about before the call was the importance of doing real work. Tell me about that.
So in my observation, I work in the real estate private equity industry, and I find there can sometimes be an obsession with not doing work. People brag about how, oh, well, I just put the deal together and someone raises the capital and someone runs the property and someone finds it and someone finances it. And I just collect a check and passive income. And first of all, I just find that like a little bit, I don't know. It's a value extraction mindset that I have a disappreciation for. Fundamentally, I just think that people, particularly men, really need to do real work in order to feel a sense of joy, of contribution, of value. I think that, roll back the clock a couple thousand years, the day you stopped being able to do work that contributed, brought value to the tribe, like somewhere in the back of your mind is this idea that you should probably, select yourself out of the tribe one way or another. So you didn't drag down the resources of the tribe. And so like I was doing an investor call yesterday, and like a bunch of monitors had arrived for some new hires. And so I went out and unboxed the monitors, cutting open cardboard and putting together the bases and the cords and stuff as I'm, on the headset talking to the investor. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm putting together monitors. And they're like, don't you have like, isn't that beneath you or something like that? I'm like, no, this is real work that needs to be done. And my team sees that they have a leader who is very willing and eager to do real work. And, sometimes talking on the phone can be a little abstract, and it can be very joyful to just do something where it's obvious that there's an end outcome that had value. Here we had some monitors that were in boxes that were not usable. Here's some usable monitors. My team can see, electronically speaking, like let there be light, and I find so much more satisfaction from doing the call while unboxing the monitors than from just doing the call. And on weekends, I might have like a breakfast with my family, and I like cooking the meal. I'm not a chef by any means, but I find the meals more enjoyable when I prepare it for my family. And then I might go out and go do some lumberjacking. So I've got like a big wooded lot, and like I could obviously hire someone to go take down dead trees and stuff. But I forget who said it, to chop your own firewood, it warms you twice. I find there to be something deeply satisfying about chopping my own firewood, about taking down a tree and cutting it up and splitting it and stacking the wood, and then a year later burning that wood in the fireplace, or when I'm having a party. Like I did that. Like, and a day where I don't do real work is almost always like a less satisfying day to me. Even when I'm on vacation, I try to figure out a way that I can do real work. And work, by the way, is just in my mind, it's something effortful that requires mental or physical effort, ideally both, that creates value for yourself or the people that matter to you. It doesn't need to be answering email. In fact, it's kind of the opposite of answering email. If I can do something just useful, that I can that's palpable, that I can see the end outcome of that work, I'm just so much happier. In fact, that's kind of a big reason why I got out of technology, is you work on abstract things. I've been in week-long meetings with 10 people, where at the end of the meeting you still can't decide where the bug in the software is, or who's going to fix it, or whose fault it is. Whereas like we have an apartment building coming out of the ground right now, and gosh, it feels so good to visit that thing. 100 years from now, I'll be dead and in the ground, and that building will still be creating value for the people on this earth. People need food and shelter. I've got one of them ticked off for that many people for the next century. After I'm gone, there will be a thing here that matters. That's the fruit of the sweat of my brow. And I might go like run a paint roller for just a second while I'm out there, trying not to get in the way of the people trying to get work done. But like, it just feels so good to have like a tangible outcome of your effort. And if you let yourself get too disconnected from that, it can be incredibly demotivating. People often ask, well, how do you do so much or whatever? And I think as long as you stay really, really connected to the outcome, it's hyper motivating. Like I have no lack of energy or desire to go do meaningful work. And I think most people feel that way. It's just that they don't give themselves meaningful work to do. So they don't feel very motivated to do it. And then they live kind of a small life, and then they maybe regret what they never did, or that they never achieved their potential, or whatever story gets wrapped around that.
Yeah, absolutely. This notion of real work really appeals to me as well. I've always enjoyed working on motorcycles or houses or cars. Something that's fine
I've
to me.
I've I've flipped over 100 cars. I did it just on the
Really?
side, just because I got home from managing software engineers all day, and I'm like, I have to do something with my hands, and I just work on cars.
I love it. I love it. And, outcomes, as you mentioned, the software industry and large organizations where I was in corporations, the outcomes were somewhat diffuse,
Mm-hmm.
were hard to trace. What's my individual contribution to this outcome? Outcomes can be dangerous. The Bhagavad Gita said that those that focus on the fruits of their actions or the outcomes are always miserable because they're always anxious about what they do. So I read that from a surrounding perspective. I'm like, that's interesting. But we also need outcomes as agents in the world, as as business people, as men. It's an interesting relationship with outcomes. What's the right path? And one thing I really like about doing the work is that it's a short scale outcome. The stakes are very clear. It's done or it's not. It's so much more finite, I find, than a lot of the thought stuff that
Mhm.
I've done throughout my career. And it's such a nice gear to click into to feel agency and overcome challenges and see a finished product. So that really appeals to me as well.
Absolutely. And I don't think you have to be obsessed with the outcome. I think that you just have to treat yourself to the outcome when it arrives, right? So I do think you do lead a much happier life when you focus on the process or on the effort and not the outcome. And the outcome does tend to happen somewhat effortlessly, almost the less you yearn for it. But treat yourself. Like I could choose, like many people would say that I'm a fool to take an hour of my day to go drive to a job site and run a paint roller for a few minutes and see how there's, sheetrock mud tape paint now where there was just framing the last time I saw it. But
Hmm.
like I have to tell my brain, like, you did a thing and now there's a good outcome. So you should probably go keep doing a thing. So like, indulge yourself in the outcome every opportunity you can possibly get, because you can only do the process for so long without any outcomes. And yes, in today's modern life, the outcomes can be quite diffuse and disconnected, and it's very demotivating when you don't see them. Like it is a good use of my time to go walk my properties and pick up trash. To just, this is going to sound kind of crazy, but I'll go to my buildings and I'll touch them, I'll talk to them, I'll say, what do you need? How can I love you better? What can my team do for you? And I'll just sit at one of my buildings and sit in the courtyard, and I'll just talk to the building. And I find it incredibly fulfilling and almost always insightful. And I get to, like, hey, I own this thing. Like, I forgot about that because all I do is look at spreadsheets in my office all day. Like, this is really cool. This is really exciting. And by the way, I should probably do XYZ to make sure that this building gets everything that it needs.
I love that. I almost sounds like micro outcomes. You're just aware that the outcomes are there to be seized upon.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller outcomes and bring it to gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm hearing.
The apartment building doesn't need to be done, like, because it takes a couple of years. So you definitely, hey, we have a framed building now where we just had dirt, or we've got a pile of dirt where we just had an empty field, or hey, we've got a building that's complete but has no people. And yeah, you have to celebrate those incremental outcomes, and it's hyper motivating to go get more of them.
I love that. I want to go back to your past. One thing that's striking about your past is you were homeless at 14, and you said that you loved that you were raised by a crazy woman. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I'm your prototypical Gen Xer, I suppose. We're a generation of men raised by women. I never met my father, and then my mom, when I was 6 years old, had a traumatic brain injury, and so she was missing a piece of her brain bigger than your fist. Had to relearn how to walk and talk and everything, but still had pretty extreme disabilities and deficits and stuff like that. So she had I'm going to call it a loose grip on reality. Tight enough that she could kind of hold down a place to live, couldn't hold down a job, could interact with people, but had a loose grip on reality, so that you know we might be in a homeless situation, and she'd be like, Nick, I love you so much. You're so amazing. Like, you're gonna be president one day. And I'm like, Mom, what's wrong with you? We're homeless. Like how could I ever possibly, achieve anything when this is like our starting point? And well, Nick, the best is yet to come. And like, she is a mom who loved her son, and I hope that we are all loved by our mothers. And she loved me with such irrational exuberance
Hmm.
that it taught me to be kind of a little untethered to rationality. I think that most people, there's the expression that you overestimate what you can do in a year and you underestimate what you can do in a decade. And man, people just sell themselves so short on what they can do with their life. They're like, I think that most people, we think that we fear the darkness. We fear evil or war or famine or whatever it is. But I think that more than anything, we fear the light within us. I think that God or the universe or whatever, whoever's listening to this believes in, I think that you have something inside you. You have a soul or something that is greater than the sum of the atoms that make up your body. And I think there is a bright light that was put inside you. And I think most people are a little terrified to let that light shine. And they make up excuses why they shouldn't shine that light. And at a young age, all of those excuses were stripped away, right? Like, I think some people, they feel embarrassed or ashamed, like, oh, I was meant for great things, and I'm going to change the world. And we get this notion that that's not possible. But here's the thing. Only the people crazy enough to think they can change the world ever do. Sane people have never changed the world. So I encourage anyone listening to just go out and be crazy. What's the craziest great thing you can possibly imagine? Just go do it. And what's the worst thing that could happen? You at least die trying. That sounds a lot better to me than giving up decades before you hit the grave. That's just my crazy idea, and a crazy idea that I was given to me by a crazy mom. And I guess I'm in retrospect glad I never met my father. Probably wouldn't have been a great influence on me. And I find that trauma plus love is it's like a superpower. It's like a recipe for tenacity or grit or determination or something like that. And you look at biographies of great people. You mentioned Abraham Lincoln, exact same formula in his youth, and you see it over and over again. And sometimes I think people almost like fabricate trauma if they don't have it, because it's such an essential component of strength. It's the crucible by which we can grow. So I'm so very grateful that I had a pretty brutal childhood. Every horrible thing that you can imagine happening to someone who was homeless and without support and stuff did, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, not for a second, because it made me the man that I am today. When you're leading a large organization and something happens, a government policy change happens that could derail the thing that you've built for the last decade or whatever, like, it could be easy to be like crushed by that. But when you've been freezing and starving and have nothing, you have just an ounce of gratitude when there's a government policy change. You laugh at it like, I could build all this again in half the time if I needed to. I'm going to find a way to prevail, because I survived childhood, because I, no matter what, never stopped loving and taking care of my mom. No one can ever do anything to me worse than anything my mom did to me, and she loved it the whole way through. And it's only the people who love us that really have any power whatsoever to harm us. So what can anyone on this earth ever do to me? So people that go through that, they end up with like a weird kind of strength, in my experience, and I'm so very grateful for that.
Trauma well processed is such a powerful lever. You mentioned an interesting formula, trauma plus love. How does that work?
So I would define love as the selfless devotion to the spiritual growth of a being, of a spiritual being. And which is kind of a weird definition of love, but I get that from M. Scott Peck from The Road Less Traveled, who a huge fan of that book. If you've never read that book, go check that out. Just a fantastic, I don't know what to call it, written by a psychologist and based on years of therapy and stuff like that. A lot of my worldview comes from M. Scott Peck, an embarrassing amount. And he would say that kind of from an Eastern philosophical perspective, that life is suffering, but then once you understand that is suffering, that like the suffering ends. That's a very kind of Eastern perspective. And then he defines a concept called legitimate suffering. So illegitimate suffering is like, you stub your toe or something like that. Like, you don't grow or get better, from that. That's illegitimate suffering. And legitimate suffering is pain that precipitates growth. And usually, I'll take a step aside from M. Scott Peck here. In my experience, love is like the catalyst that allows illegitimate suffering to become legitimate suffering, to go from just a person that's like living in misery to a person who can grow and transcend that pain and they become something greater as a result of it. And when you experience pain in the absence of love from yourself or from your mom or someone, I mean, that's when you start to develop a belief that maybe you shouldn't be on this earth. When you have this like persistent, pervasive pain that won't go away, and no one is loving you through that pain, that's like your signal from the universe that like you shouldn't be here. So, and I don't know, I love talking to people. I love doing stories. You know, my wife and I, we each do lots of like teaching and speaking engagements. So we get to see these patterns a lot. And so that's the pattern that I've seen over and over again, is people that go through extraordinary suffering, adversity with love through that adversity, they have like phenomenal outcomes and strength. In fact, you know, my belief is that, you know, as a mom, your job is probably to kind of like love your kids, and your job as that is to give your kids that adversity component, and the two combined can create like really beautiful, powerful spiritual beings. I wish it was socially acceptable for me to just like drop my 9-year-old off on the other side of town and she has to like figure out a way to get home. I live in a very safe community, by the way. But like it would take her several hours to figure out a way to get home or something like that. Like, you know, Richard Branson said that his mom would throw him in the river to see if he could teach himself how to swim. Like that level of, you know, just you're there to make sure your kid doesn't actually drown, and you're encouraging them and loving them through the process, but exposing them to the most potent therapeutic adversity, struggle, challenge you can possibly conjure. So I think those are the magic ingredients that you need to become like a powerful being. And the earlier in your life that happens, the better. But it happens sooner or later to everybody, that they go through incredibly gut-wrenchingly terrible things. And I really hope that you have love there with that pain, so that you can transcend it and grow from it.
Let's dig into that a bit. So love is two-tailed. We have the love for ourselves and we have love for others. And first of all, in love for yourself, you score a 5 out of 5 on loving yourself, which is about top 20% in my diagnostic. Have you always been that way?
Hmm. So I have always had a lot of ego strength. So there's a great book, The Drama of the Gifted Child, which is where I get a few of these ideas from. And if you go look at, you know, like biographies of people that had challenging upbringings and developed strong character traits as a result of it, like you get it's like a virtuous kind of hubris. It's an
Hmm.
idea that no matter what comes your way, you will be able to overcome. It's this overwhelming confidence in your ability to prevail. And that tends to be like one of the most important traits that someone needs to have success, to have happiness, to have fulfillment, whatever, is this notion that, you know, God will never give you a problem so great that you can't solve it, or however you choose to frame that, whatever your religious beliefs are. And I certainly had that in spades. And I don't know if that necessarily translates into love, though. You know, I'm a Christian, and you know, have like I think that if you set aside, so let's say that you know, Jesus was not the Son of God and was merely just a really powerful philosopher. I think Jesus created this notion, like this revolutionary concept of unlimited forgiveness. Like that's like his like claim to fame. And most people, for whatever reason, they really struggle with shame and guilt, and they really need a power greater than themselves to tap into, to forgive themselves, to love themselves. Just the, I mean, I think the mere fact that we have breath within our lungs, right? That our heart beats, that we get the gift of conscious thought, tells us that something out there loves us, something created us, and we didn't have to do anything to earn it or deserve it, and we certainly can't do anything to lose it or to forsake it. Like it's just there waiting for us, and we just have to be open to it. And I don't know when I really started loving myself. It probably wasn't until like later in my life. I think I probably had different things I needed to prove to myself or to other people for much of my life before I could say I was like a 5 out of 5 on loving myself. Maybe I just had to screw up and forgive myself, or feel like God had forgiven me enough times that I could say that. So for me, I've always had a lot of ego strength, a lot of confidence that I could overcome things. So, I didn't fear failure or whatever the way a lot of people struggle with. But I also wouldn't say I really loved myself like a 5 out of 5 until pretty late in my life. Maybe certainly until after I had children. I think until you have children, it's almost difficult to comprehend how much your parents probably loved you, and maybe it gives you some capacity to forgive your parents for whatever you think they did to you or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, probably in the last 9 years sometime is when, I don't know. I just chose love and forgiveness.
I find that self-love can be a lifetime project for many of us. And the other layer is love from others. And that helps us through difficulty. And for me, that's been the critical dimension is, let's say you're suffering about something. Do you have someone that you can talk about that with and get it out and get it out there? Can you put yourself in a position that they can love you and they can support you? And that's been critical for me at each of my bottoms is being able to have support, not just be all on my shoulders alone. And then from that typically emerges some sort of work to do, some sort of lesson, some sort of thing to step into that I can learn from this experience. So I
Absolutely.
think the support aspect of suffering is really critical.
hmm I think we need to, at some point, be convinced and constantly reminded that we are worthy of love. And like it, it really does have to come from someone else. That has to start the fire one way or another. It's very
I
hard
agree.
to do that spontaneously in yourself.
I agree.
And some people, for various reasons, are drawn to people that don't love them, and then they end up, with this very bad negative feedback loop in their life. And I think because I was raised by a mother who loved me, despite extraordinarily comically terrible faults,
Mm,
uh, I grew up believing that I was loved and I was worthy of love, and so I've always surrounded myself with people that love me. And my wife is certainly like the greatest source of that. She's a profoundly spiritually powerful person, who loves me more than I know. And I make a point of spending time with people who love me. Block time on my calendar, meet with them weekly, go out of my way to send them text messages, and they message me back. And like I don't know. That's all anyone needs is just those little, just constant reminders of how terribly loved you are. In our business, we have an employee whose only job is to give people gifts. That's their only job, and they think they have the best job ever. They think they won the lottery. And I find, like, if we just never stop reminding people how much we love them, I
mhm.
think we're going to be successful in business. And even if we're not, well, I'm going to have a lot of joy along the way. And yeah, so you just have to keep being open to those reminders, and keep sending those reminders to other people. You know what? People are probably going to reciprocate that.
Absolutely. Um, no, I love that.
Here's
Bringing,
here's my wall. This isn't people. So like these are all newspaper articles about me, and these are all just like the most heartfelt thank you cards and stuff right here that people have ever sent to me. So if I'm ever feeling down about myself, be like, hey, look, there's like 100 people who really love me, and handwritten words, tearful penned words to that effect. I just never stop reminding myself how loved I am.
I think that's a very wise practice, very loving practice. And also a concept I've new to me that I've been really intrigued with recently is this concept of Ordo Amoris, or the order of love from St. Augustine. Have you ever run across that?
Mm-mm.
It's being used as in a political argument. So if we take away that, which is what got it in the news, and just look back at the concept, I think it's very powerful. It says that we should start really imagine that we're a drop into a pond and there's ripples going out, that we should really focus around love of those closest to us first. That's the order of love.
I see.
Those that are closest to our heart, and really invest there and get the full richness of that, and then expand outward. And frequently people get over their skis, they get way out on one of the outer rings, and they're really passionate about some ill in society that they can't really affect, and they're unhappy. And maybe they're not doing the work that's closer to home of really building up
Hmm.
that love bank with the people that are
Hmm.
closest to them. So that really snapped things into shape for me that if you're out of balance on the order of love, it's not a recipe for happiness. And you affect a lot of the outside world in your work and your charity. But what I'm hearing from you is that primacy of being at the center, really taking care of the love that's right around you and really harvesting that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like rewarding yourself with the outcome. You need to put yourself in touch with the outcome of your love. So my wife and I, we love to give. I think that people who say that money can't buy happiness didn't give enough away. And I
Yeah,
carry
well
around
said.
$100 bills in my wallet just to give them away. It's actually cost me a fortune this week because at school they're doing this fundraiser, and so I just give them a bunch of money every time I walk by. And so today I'm like, come on guys, how long are you going to be here? This is getting ridiculous. I don't know if you're camping out just for me or not. Which I actually told them this morning, getting what you want in life is mostly just about showing up until you get it. So like I actually really, if you showed up every day with your fundraiser just for me, I would respect that. But I wanted my children to grow up in like a really powerful kind of like mindset, and I did not have the heart to like homeschool or anything like that. So my wife and I, we found this like amazing kind of startup school here, and they were in the basement of this old church building, kind of a decrepit facility. I'm like, I really love the culture, the mindset, the values here, but my kids are not going to grow up in a good mindset in this space. This is not a good temple of learning that you have here, unfortunately. And so we found an abandoned office building, a 40,000 square foot office building, and did an adaptive reuse and converted it to a school. And like everybody helped out so much. And, the seller lost money and the broker lost money and the bank lost money. And none of them cared. They were all joyful that in this office collapse, at least some good can come of it, that this school can be birthed. And, we had parents and teachers ripping up carpet and rolling paint and doing even the fire marshal like gave us waivers who like building safety fire, like they ever do that, like walking through, they're like, hey, your hallways are too narrow here. I'm like, oh, well, that's the end of this thing then, because I can't go widen all the hallways. Like, we'll look past it. I'm like, really? I've never seen the inspector to look past anything in any of our for-profit buildings. And so we were like 5.1 million all in. We just got our long-term financing in place. 8.3 million was the appraised value on that school building. So like we didn't stroke a check for that. And there's like so many other people who made it happen so much more than us. But we got to use our unique real estate, jujitsu skills that we have to like create insane value for other people. But here's the thing, Mike, because I helped the people that I live a few miles away from. Every day, I start my day by dropping off my 4 kids at the school I built.
Mm.
And I just sit there for a moment. I treat myself and I watch 100 kids stream into this gleaming building. And it's not my name on the building. They don't know who I am. The principal knows who I am. And he gives me like a big smile when I walk in. And like, how do you have a bad day when that's how you start your day every day, so yes, loving the people in your immediate sphere of influence, the people that you see and touch and feel every day, it is so rewarding. It is so rewarding and just so valuable. Like I don't struggle to cough up money for the charity every morning because I'm so invested in this thing that I love, right? And if it was something that was more remote, less tangible, I might get into this weird thing about like, well, God wants me to give and I'm supposed to give, and there's a sick kid on the TV commercial that says I should give, but I don't really get the same visceral
Right.
warm fuzzy that I get from giving to a person that I see every day. So I would absolutely encourage you to love the people that you can feel in your life.
Right.
Love in a courageous, reckless, insanely huge way, and you are never going to have a bad day when you choose to love in that way. That rhymed. That was pretty good.
Great, great example. It makes me think in charitable giving, often we talk about the three T's: time, talent, and treasure.
Mm,
And treasure, writing a check, as you said, sometimes you just can't really feel it.
hmm.
We can put in the time, work in a soup kitchen or animal shelter, and that's all really good stuff. But there's a real magic, and I heard it in your story, when time and talent come together, or when all three come
Hmm.
together. So
Yes.
being able to use your real estate jujitsu, your talent, putting in the time, a little bit of treasure, you're hitting all 3 points of that compass. No wonder
Yes.
it's so fulfilling.
Yes. I pushed a carpet cleaner around that 40,000 square foot building doing the real work. And there was like a good Overwatch work, it's good kind of supervising kind of work. And also just no one wanted to do it. It was horrible work, just horrible work. It was a really good sled push it took like 5 days to do it. And some
Yeah.
people would say, what a ridiculous use of your time. And I couldn't disagree more. I couldn't disagree more. It's so fulfilling to push around that stupid carpet cleaner. And I got to run laps watching this building transform as I'm like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing that over there. And, and I get to walk those halls every day when I drop my kids off.
Beautiful. Well, Nick, you've done a lot of work. You've had a lot of, significant life experiences that you've really learned from. And then you mentioned that you're excited about spirituality and continuing in that direction. Just as a parting question, where are you headed? What are you excited about getting into next spiritually and learning?
So I feel like I'm in a better place with that than I've been in a long time. When I was young, I went to school to like train in ministry and stuff. And I think for a long time, I felt like I don't know, was at best phoning it in, or I definitely did not feel in touch with my creator, the way I do today, the way I have in the last, several years. And I think I got distracted with, I don't know, with life as we all do. I think that's a common spiritual journey for people to be on. I think that men in particular can get really kind of obsessed with work in their young working years. And then when they
Yep.
get to midlife, they often have what we in society lampoon as a midlife crisis. But I think it's a very righteous thing. Like if you've spent 10 or 20 years doing something that you shouldn't do or shouldn't be as focused on as you are, well, it's quite righteous for your brain to say, "Hey, stop doing that," and you should probably have a little bit of a crisis as a result of that disalignment. And I spent a lot of time going to like spiritual retreats and just being more engaged at church, and then I think being a father and guiding your children down that journey, like man, what do you want your children to believe, right? Like I want them to be exposed to truth of all kinds, and I want it's a powerful crucible for what you actually believe when your children start to get old enough that you are trying to pass on that wisdom, right? And children have a way of asking very interesting questions that cut to the core of what you believe in a profound way. So I see myself being far more energized, but also content with where I am, where I'm going. So the school that I went to, it's like a seminary, but then it's also they came to this idea that most people who graduate from seminary, if you check in with them 10 years later, like 90% of them are not practicing in the trade because there's not that many paying jobs out there in ministry. It's not a very well paying trade, and you gotta get a wife and kids, you got to pay the bills. So that's all there is to it. So they said, what we're going to do is we're going to have this really, hard sciences kind of, we're going to switch from a college, from a seminary to a university. We're going to have like an amazing pre-med, amazing pre-law. And I went there for the engineering school. I got a computer science degree, and they had like a really like just incredible, cheap engineering, education experience there. And so you get a bachelor's degree in ministry, and you get a bachelor's degree in a trade, in a science. So you get a bachelor's of science, bachelor's of arts, and their vision is that you go out and be very successful in that trade, and that success would allow you to essentially like have a ministry. And so I've kind of like become the man that they set out to create, I suppose, where we don't do any like pay-per-click marketing, or I don't know, the things that most like private equity funds do to raise money. Like my wife and I, we try to just go do a lot of teaching and speaking engagements. My wife has a coaching program, which is sort of I don't know, the modern euphemism for counseling or therapy or ministry. And I think about the privilege, the impact I have to go speak to rooms full of entrepreneurs and physicians or other professionals that have a huge impact, and being able to, I don't know, just nudge their path towards righteousness in some small way. It's incredibly impactful, and I can't believe that I get the privilege to do it. And somehow, I don't know, figured out a way to just kind of intertwine that with the private equity business that we have. So I don't know. That's kind of what I see for the future. And I don't understand how it is that we got to a third of a billion, and it seems like we're going to have like a billion at some point in the future here, which seems just absurd. But we're grateful for it, and we think that we get to make the world a better place to live in the most tangible sense of the word. I mean, I grew up in Section 8 housing. Like my roommate was shot, and my friend was stabbed at the bus stop, and like I just grew up in a horrible environment. And so to be able to serve other professionals, other people practicing my trade, our investors, then ultimately the people who live in our communities that are often, about a third to half our portfolio is income restricted, real estate, multifamily properties. I don't know. I feel like I get the privilege to serve so many people in so many ways, and and I get to. I don't really believe in work-life balance. I don't think that you somehow spend 1 hour at the day at the gym and 1 hour having sex with your wife and 1 hour praying and 1 hour working at your, vertical income business and 1 hour working on horizontal income. I think it all just kind of flows and you can't really tell when you're doing what. I think if you're praying while you're working out, or I got to do like a workout with my pastor just coincidentally day before yesterday. It was like really awesome. He like has like an amazing deadlift. I was blown away, and like that's like a really cool, I don't know, synergistic kind of thing. And when I get to live my entrepreneurial life with my wife, who's my full partner in the business, I get to do a whole bunch of things all at once. And so whatever that is, being able to live in all those different gardens at the same time, and just kind of serendipitously pursuing whatever the moment brings me, like that's what I see for my future. And it feels like a really beautiful thing. I can't wait to see what it looks like.
It's awesome. I think you have an outstanding trajectory, not only from a financial perspective, business perspective, but as is evident, your spiritual growth, how you lead with love around you, just really maximizing, your opportunities in life, particularly towards service. So this was wonderful. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everybody.